Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is ASU Care, and we are presenting Tuesday Morning Music and Tea, a program we co-present with ASU School of Music, and we are broadcasting live from ASU Care right this moment. We're so happy to be masked up and in the venue today for another special show. We love these performance opportunities, and despite the fact that we cannot have an audience here, we still wanted to continue presenting these shows, and today is an extra special one. We're going to tell you about a couple upcoming programs for just a moment, and then we're going to hand it over to the McLin-Campbell duo for about the next hour. This Thursday, October 22nd, our very popular Beams music series will present Rob Ricardo. He's kind of an old school surf troubadour. He was raised on the sounds of James Taylor all the way on up to stuff like Jack Johnson. He's a very skilled guitar player, and we love his original music. He'll be playing some tunes from his older records, and he has a new record coming out that he'll be sharing some music from. These shows are starting at 7:30 p.m., so just be advised. We have moved the time of these back half an hour from the normal time so people can tune into some of the political events if they choose that same night. Thursday, October 29th, we will present Elizabeth Ersick. She is a sacred music practitioner, cellist, keyboardist, very talented person, and she's doing a multimedia set of contemporary, sort of new age music with some very custom, beautiful visuals, shots of Sedona that were created especially for her. And we really like that she's going to be pulling in all of the stuff that she knows how to do into this program, and we hope you'll tune in for that. You'll tune in the same way you are right now on our YouTube channel or our Facebook Live. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you will never miss a program. You'll get notified as soon as we go live. Today we are joined by two faculty members, Katherine McLin on violin and Dr. Andrew Campbell on piano. We love the great musical and actual dialogue that these two have, and they're going to be playing selections from sonatas by Beethoven and Strauss. We hope you enjoy the program, comment, share, ask questions. They'll be seeing everything happening in the chat, and we're just so grateful to have this time with them and with you. So for about the next hour, the McLin-Campbell duo. Enjoy.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. My name is Andrew Campbell, and on behalf of my colleague and partner, Katie, we're thrilled to be back in the Care Center. We've performed many times here, as have our students, and although there is no one currently in the room with us, we can feel the spirit coming through the screen that I'm looking at right now, and we know many people are watching online. This is a wonderful institution, and we hope that you continue to support it during these challenging times. So of course, we're going to start this short program with a piece by Mr. Beethoven in celebration of the 250th anniversary of his birth. This piece that we're playing is his 6th sonata. It's Opus 30. It was written around 1802, and he wrote 10 sonatas for keyboard and violin, so this is kind of right in the middle of those 10. By 1802, he had been living in Vienna for about a decade. He had moved there from Bonn, and he had initially established his reputation as an amazing pianist, a virtuoso pianist, an incredible improviser on the piano, and then also a composer for the piano, whether it was piano solo or piano chamber music. But after about a decade in Vienna, he began to transition to writing larger works, symphonies, large choral works, and eventually his only opera. You achieved slightly greater fame and prestige from these larger works. But all throughout his life, of course, he kept composing chamber music and works for the piano. Part of the transition was just that. He had enough benefactors and patrons to support him while he would compose a larger work like a symphony. But also his increasing deafness made it hard for him to continue as a performing pianist. Just a little bit about Beethoven's personality, I think, will be helpful when you listen to this piece. Beethoven was born in Bonn, which is a very small kind of provincial town outside of Vienna. Probably most of the Viennese couldn't find Bonn on a map, and certainly none of them would ever deign to visit Bonn. That was kind of the relationship between Bonn and Vienna. Vienna, of course, was a cultural, political world capital at that time, and Beethoven goes from the small town to the big city, essentially to seek his fame and to fortune and to make his mark on Vienna. But he always had a bit of a tortured relationship with the Viennese. He had to earn their respect because he was kind of a country boy. He had to prove himself to them, which he probably didn't like too much. But he was dependent on the nobility and the aristocracy and the wealthy people of Vienna to support him. So he was able to navigate this very delicate line between perhaps resenting a little bit the Viennese and at the same time ingratiating himself to them enough that they would support his musical causes. The reason I bring this up, and another aspect of his personality before I go to the music, Beethoven was kind of a brash, slightly rude person. He had this amazing ability to envision art and music as bringing all of humanity together. He had an incredible love for humanity. Something like the Ninth Symphony he truly felt was a piece of art that would unite humans in a brotherhood, a common feeling of humanity. But at the same time, he had difficulty with individual humans. He would often get into arguments even with relatives. He was merciless on his music publishers, criticizing them for writing his music down incorrectly. If anyone has seen a Beethoven score, I don't know how anyone could translate any of that chicken scratch into music. He was constantly haranguing piano builders to build him better, louder pianos with more keys. He would break the pianos and send them back and say, look at this terrible piano you've built for me, when of course it was he himself who broke the piano with his vigorous playing. In any case, that brashness comes from probably just part of his personality. His upbringing was quite difficult. He did not have the happiest family situation. And then moving from Bonn to Vienna, he probably has a chip on his shoulder trying to prove himself to the Viennese. So, why is all this important? Well, when you hear this sublime piece that we're about to play, you will hear incredibly beautiful melodies, very refined, very elegant, things that would please the Viennese to no end. And then every once in a while, you'll hear a bump, or you'll hear a loud note that jumps out, or a crescendo that goes nowhere, or something that's suddenly soft and then suddenly loud. And you'll scratch your head and think, what is that? Well, the Viennese would do that very same thing. So I really think you can hear in this piece and in much of Beethoven's music this dual conflict, this idea of pleasing the society that is supporting you and at the same time making your own mark, your own stamp, your own individual statement, kind of tweaking the society while at the same time acknowledging it. So you're going to hear a beautiful phrase right next to a dramatic phrase or even an ugly phrase, and that's all part of Mr. Beethoven's style. So we hope you enjoy this. We're playing the first movement of the Opus 30 No. 1 Sonata in A major, and please enjoy. Thank you. Thank you very much. We hope you enjoyed that delightful piece of Beethoven. One of the many tricks and funny things that he does, of course, is having the ending be very quiet and very delicate, which didn't seem quite appropriate for a piece that had so many exciting moments. We are now going to play a wonderful sonata by Richard Strauss. Most of you probably know Strauss through his tone poems, things like Don Juan or Till Eulenspiegel, or perhaps his operas, Salome or Rosenkavalier. Strauss wrote this sonata about 85 years after the sonata that Beethoven wrote. And I think you can hear two things right off the bat. You can hear how the form of the sonata for violin and piano increased, the textures and the demands on the instruments increased dramatically over those 85 years. The piano actually increased dramatically over those 85 years in terms of size and sound. But also a little bit of Strauss's character. He wrote this in the early part of his career, and he was from a musical family. His father was a wonderful horn player in the symphony. And in the early part of his career, like many young composers, he composed in what we would, I guess, call smaller forms. So chamber music, songs, and works for piano. This was his last work like that, his last smaller chamber work. When you hear it, you'll think, well, there's nothing small about this work. And it's very true. It's almost as if he was trying to compose something for violin and piano that hadn't been done before, a size, a grandeur, an intensity that had not been achieved in these two instruments. And you can kind of almost hear Strauss at one point in the music sort of throw up his hands and say, I've got to move on and write now for the full orchestra. And that's exactly what he did. This is his last piece of chamber music, and he composed for another almost 50 years after this without composing chamber music. He would always write songs. He was married to a wonderful soprano, and he loved singers, and he would always write those. But it was all about the orchestral pieces and then moving on to the opera for the rest of his career. So in any case, we're going to play all three movements of this wonderful work, but we're going to stop in between each movement to talk about the movements, maybe to answer some questions that come up on the chat. So feel free to weigh in with some questions and some ideas and some thoughts. The first movement starts with a wonderful rhythmic motive right at the beginning that you'll hear throughout the first movement. It's an incredible piece for both instruments, and I think it really pushes the range of both instruments to the extremes, both technically and emotionally. So we hope you enjoy the excitement of this youthful sonata by Richard Strauss. We'll play the first movement, and then we'll come back up and talk a little bit about the second movement, maybe answer some questions. Here we go. Ah, the excitement of youth. Whew! Yeah, that's definitely a piece for a young person to compose. You can hear the incredible energy, the incredible vitality, and the fact that at a certain point it seems like there's not enough notes on the violin or the piano to contain his incredible enthusiasm. So I'm going to look over here and see if there are any questions. I got to take off my glasses, pardon me. All right, put them back on, I guess. There was a classical musician at the living and dead that they would like to add to their duo. Oh, interesting. Okay, so one question, if there's a classical musician living or dead that they would like to add to our duo, who would it be?
Oh my gosh.
So,
That's a great question.
wow, what a great question. I guess cello would be the obvious combination for this. I don't know, do you have any favorite cellists, Dr. McLin?
Every cellist is my favorite cellist.
Well, there's a little known secret about classical musicians. If you're not a cellist, you wish that you were. Everyone wishes they played the cello. It actually is the exact range of the human voice, if you think about it, and you get to hug your instrument. And I don't know, whenever I see a cellist playing, they always seem to be smiling. Certainly our wonderful colleague, Tom Landshut at ASU, always has a wonderful smile on his face. So it seems like just the perfect instrument to play. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, I think I can't think of an actual cellist. Let me look at another question here. What is the classical music piece that you feel reflects the mood of 2020? Wow, the classical music piece that reflects the mood of 2020. I'm not sure why I started to answer that question. We actually are doing a concert a week from Friday at ASU. It's virtual only, and we're going to be performing a piece that I think captures the mood a little bit. It's by a wonderful African-American composer named Billy Childs. He's an incredible musician, jazz pianist, composer of both jazz and classical music. And he wrote a piece that we're playing for violin, piano, that was his emotional response to an incredibly difficult, traumatic event that happened in our country maybe about 10 years ago. So I would encourage you, if you're free next Friday, the 30th at 7:30, to join us online at the ASU School of Music, the virtual online, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that piece. Okay, so now we're going to play the second movement of the Strauss Sonata. This movement actually is kind of interesting. It is called Improvisation, which is an unusual title for a movement in the middle of a sonata. We think of a classical sonata as being a very rigorous, formally structured, carefully thought out piece of music, and Strauss calls this improvisation, I think hoping for us as performers and you as audience to consider that perhaps we're improvising. Hopefully we won't do too much of that today. But what's also interesting about this is he wrote this movement last, meaning he composed the first and the third movements of the sonata. Then he wrote the second movement, and he published the second movement separately as an independent piece called Improvisation. Does it fit into the sonata? Of course, it's part of the sonata, but it does really feel like a very, very different piece. The outer movements you'll hear when we play the third movement, that movement shares a lot of the DNA of the first movement, some actual themes, and also the intensity of the sound. But this middle movement is incredibly lyrical, incredibly wonderful. There's a little moment of drama, but mostly it's all sunshine and lightness and beauty. It's extremely lyrical. At this moment in his life, Strauss had fallen in love with a soprano, and actually he ended up marrying her. And so I think you can hear not only those amorous feelings in this work, but also these soaring melodies that Katie will play. You can certainly hear a soprano, a great soprano, sing those melodies. So here's the improvisation, the second movement of the Strauss Sonata. Just a very, very beautiful movement in between these two titanic, heroic movements. Hopefully that calmed everyone down a little bit. Did some good for my heart rate, so that's good. I'm going to look over here at a couple more questions. Who is our favorite composer to play?
Brahms.
That was a short answer. Brahms. Brahms was, oh gosh. Well, I'll keep it short. Brahms was just an amazing human being, amazing musician. He was also a pianist who loved playing chamber music and wrote chamber music, and some of his best and closest friends were violinists. So I get the sense when we play his violin and piano music together, I just kind of think of Brahms and his friend Joachim in particular performing together and discussing the music, maybe arguing over the music, maybe having a little glass of wine afterwards to figure out what the argument was all about. All those good things. So Brahms, definitely. Let's see, one more question here. It must be enjoyable and challenging to find and play lesser-known works. What are some of your favorite lesser-known pieces to play, and composed by whom?
Well, Respighi Sonata is not well known, and I think it's one of the great sonatas for violin piano.
It is very enjoyable to find and to play lesser-known works. Katie mentioned this wonderful sonata by Ottorino Respighi, Italian composer, composed around 1917. He wrote huge, colorful orchestral works, and then this one piece of chamber music for violin and piano. Actually, it's kind of on the scale of the Strauss sonata, only bigger, if you can imagine that. But an incredibly creative composer for both instruments. We love finding new music. Katie will spend hours online going through different things. The internet is so helpful for that. Some of our recent composers that we've played that we enjoy, Lyra Auerbach. Katie's played a lot of her music and knows her quite well. They premiered a piece of hers together. She's one of those people that's amazing and kind of depressing because she does everything really well. She's a painter, a poet, a composer, a pianist.
Master chess champion.
She's a chess champion, a chess prodigy. Incredible musician, living in this country now. But she's one that we've really enjoyed exploring her music. It's very intense music, but a real challenge and a joy to play. Who are some of our other recent?
Really just anything new. It's so much fun to bring a piece to life.
Yeah. It's, playing a piece like Strauss or Beethoven, you have the weight of 1,000 recordings that you've heard looking over your shoulder. But when you play new music, when you premiere new music especially, or when you play new music like this piece that we're playing in a week and a half, there's only been a few performances of, you feel extremely liberated because you can kind of make it your own. But at the same time, you're just really eager to share it with an audience who's never heard it. So that's one of the joys of finding and performing new music. Great. Okay, we're going to play the last movement. We might have time for a question at the end. The last movement starts very dramatically. Again, you got to think of a young composer composing in a very theatrical way. He would quickly turn, as I mentioned, to orchestral music, but he wouldn't write something called symphony. He'd write something called Don Juan or Till Eulenspiegel. He would write orchestral music that told a story, and eventually that was not enough for him. He had to compose operas, which actually did tell a story. But I think you'll hear in this movement something that definitely is telling a story without words. So I'm going to start very murky and very dramatically, and then the piece will explode into light, and it's kind of a race towards the end. So we hope you enjoy the incredibly virtuosic, exciting last movement of the youthful Strauss Violin Sonata. Thank you. That's usually the part where the crowd goes wild. So we're assuming you're all going wild. So what a piece, huh? Yeah. Youthful exuberance at its finest. We might have time for a couple more questions. Let's see what we got over here. Whoa, here's a good one. So Louise Kerr, for whom this wonderful institution is named, this was her home, as many of you know, composed some of her most heartbreakingly beautiful compositions after the tragedies of losing two of her daughters to illness and accident. This is often happens with composers, of course, and artists in general. They work out tragedy and emotional moments in their creation. Which Beethoven pieces do you think might have been inspired by direct life influences? Do you have a favorite?
Yeah. Well, Beethoven was a master of string quartet compositions, and in his early set of Opus 18 quartets, the very final one, Opus 18 number 6, was written right around the time that his deafness was beginning to be very problematic in his life. He had sought cures for it, had not been able to find any help for it. He was trying to keep it secret because obviously a composer and performer who can't hear, it's a hard sell in Vienna. He was a hard sell in Vienna anyway. And it was around this time that he wrote Opus 18 number 6. And it's, at face value, it's a very charming, slightly odd, but very charming work until you get to the final movement. And the final movement was actually the very first time he used a title for a movement, and he called it the Melancholy. And so it's an incredibly touching work if you know what's going on in his life at the time. He begins it with a very slow, sad introduction, which melts into, again, at face value, a very happy piece. One can imagine Beethoven pretending to be happy and, mingling among the patrons and pretending like he could hear things, but he couldn't. And woven throughout the movement are these interjections of this melancholic theme. So I love that. It's one of my very favorite works of Beethoven because it's so intensely personal and autobiographical of what was happening in his life at the time.
An incredible piece. I wish I was a string player so I could play those amazing string quartets. There's another piece of his that I think shows this direct influence of something happening in his life. He wrote a very amazing violin sonata that's been nicknamed the Kreutzer Sonata. It's perhaps his largest, grandest sonata. And he wrote this specifically because a traveling virtuoso was in town by the name of, not Kreutzer, but George Bridgetower, who was of African and Polish descent. He was an amazing violinist, a performer, composer, mainly as a performer, but did some composing. And he was basically setting the European world on fire with his fantastic performances. Beethoven knew a kindred spirit when he saw one. Bridgetower was a little rough around the edges, just like Beethoven, but unbelievably talented, precocious, maybe with some sharp elbows, but also able to navigate the aristocracy, which is what Beethoven was able to do. So when Beethoven heard that Bridgetower was coming to town, he quickly threw together this piece, the Kreutzer Sonata, which is the 9th of his 10 sonatas. He actually recycled a third movement that was supposed to be the third movement of the sonata that we just played. He wrote it, he wasn't satisfied, he put it on the shelf, so he fortunately had that ready to go as the third movement. But legend has it that he wrote the first and second movements very quickly, and Bridgetower was sight reading at the concert. This is, keep in mind, one of the most difficult sonatas ever written to this day. Beethoven evidently had only sketched out the piano part because he was such a great improviser. And the poor page turner, there's a story of a page turner trying to turn Beethoven's pages, but these were pages that didn't have music on them, that had mysterious runes that Beethoven wrote that nobody knew what they meant. So you can only imagine the page turner was just terrified, just basically of being right next to Beethoven. But there's a wonderful story in this performance. There's a piano cadenza right at the beginning, because, Beethoven is trying to show off as a pianist, maybe trying to show up Bridge Tower a little bit. There was this healthy competition. On the repeat of that section, Beethoven played the cadenza, and then Bridge Tower improvised a cadenza on top of that. That evidently so impressed Beethoven, he jumped up from the piano, hugged Bridge Tower, gave him a kiss on the cheek in the middle of the performance, and then they sat back down and played the rest of the piece. So, an incredible, incredible story. But, without this amazing musician entering Beethoven's life, we don't have one of the great compositions ever written. Personal experiences, whether they're sad or ecstatic, of course, affect these wonderful musicians and composers. So, thank you so much for joining us virtually. We can't wait till we can all be together, but please continue to support music in any way that you can, and particularly the CARE Cultural Center. It's a treasure of our valley, and we need to do all we can to keep music happening here and elsewhere until the time when we can all be together, and hopefully that will be soon. So thanks very much. Thanks to the great crew that helped us today with all the technology, which Katie and I know nothing about, so we really appreciate that. And we will see you all next time. Thank you.
The McLin-Campbell duo, thank you so much for a beautiful performance and so informative and interesting, just getting all that background and extra information. I could just visualize Bridge Tower and Beethoven having this experience, and we really like getting those deeper insights into the composers and the works. So thank you so much for being here for our virtual program, everyone. We will be back for the November Tuesday Morning Music and Tea on November 17th. That performance will feature the ASU Gospel Choir. We hope you'll subscribe to our channel and tune in for that. And another one of our free morning programs is also returning. Coffee at Care, which is normally on select Wednesdays, which we put on with Arizona Opera. That will be happening Wednesday, October 28th. Same time as this program, 10:30 a.m. And that first coffee will be The Invention of Opera. And Brian Damaris, the ASU Artistic Director of Music, Theater, and Opera, will be presenting an informative program. And then they will have a guest singer come and perform some works that are part of this discussion. So we hope you'll tune in, send in your comments and questions for that as well. Please visit asukare.com. We have a lot of upcoming virtual programs, and we've also announced our regular in-person season for 2021. So if you want to take a look at what's going on at ASU Care now and in the future, we hope you will visit. Please follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitch. Whatever you like, please follow us, and thank you so much for supporting a beautiful historic venue in the heart of Scottsdale. We miss you, audiences. We can't wait to be back together again, but we really appreciate you tuning in for these virtual events while you can. We have a great rest of your week, and thank you so much.